Welcome back to Historical Crime Chronicles. Today we're looking into something a little unconventional, but absolutely fascinating: historical graffiti. Ever wondered what our ancestors were scribbling on the walls of churches, castles, and other historic buildings? Well, let's have a look. Historical graffiti might sound like an odd topic, but trust me, it's a rich resource that offers us valuable insights into the lives, beliefs, and superstitions of people from the Middle Ages to present day. Let's start with where you might find these curious carvings and inscriptions. Medieval graffiti is often found in churches, cathedrals, castles, and other stone buildings, and these aren't just confined to England, but scattered all across Europe. Some of the best preserved examples can be seen in places like Norwich Cathedral and the Tower of London. Most of these carvings date from the 12th to the 16th century, although you might come across some that are even older. What did these markings represent, you ask? Let's explore the different types. Religious symbols were a common theme: crosses, prayers, and inscriptions asking for protection or giving thanks were drawn by folks seeking divine favour. Pilgrims, much like modern travellers, left messages at landmarks and carved their visits into holy sites. These inscriptions were acts of devotion, marking their journey to a sacred place. This one was carved in the tower of St Mary's Church in Ashwell, Hertfordshire, and is a picture of either the old St Paul's Cathedral in London or the transept of Westminster Abbey. This church also has some graffiti recording two historical events, which is quite rare. The first inscription records the plague in 1348, followed by the record of a catastrophic storm described as a mighty wind on St Maur's Day in 1361. In coastal areas, ships were frequently depicted, perhaps linked to prayers for safe voyages as well as large animals and figures, believed to be protective symbols. Superstitions ruled much of medieval life, and because of this you can find daisy wheels and intertwined patterns, which were believed to ward off evil spirits or bad luck. One theory is that their continuous, unbroken design, like the daisy wheel, was thought to trap evil spirits within their endless loops. The Norfolk Medieval Graffiti Survey has recorded several thousand of these types of symbols in churches and old buildings up and down the UK. Unlike today, where graffiti is often viewed as vandalism, medieval graffiti in religious settings was not considered defacement. Instead, it was seen as a form of devotion and was common practice up until the Reformation in the 16th century. The term graffiti, however, wasn't actually a word until the 1850s. It comes from the Italian word graffio, meaning scratch, and was first used to describe ancient inscriptions found in sites like Pompeii, but was later used to refer to other markings across different time periods. The modern view of graffiti as street art or vandalism developed much later in the 20th century. So, why did attitudes toward graffiti change? Well, the Reformation in the 16th century brought about a shift in religious practices, emphasizing a more personal, scripture-based faith over physical acts of devotion like touching relics or leaving graffiti. Stricter church policies made defacing sacred spaces less acceptable. By the 17th and 18th centuries, medieval-style graffiti had largely fallen out of favor and was viewed as vandalism rather than devotion. Not all of the graffiti left on these buildings were signs of devotion, though. Many outlines of feet and hands with initials inside them can be found especially on old roofing lead, and some people just proudly carved their names, initials, or coats of arms, leaving their legacy behind just to simply say, "I was here." This type of graffiti can also be seen in one of London's most iconic landmarks. While it's famously home to the crown jewels, the Tower of London also holds some lesser-known treasures: its extensive graffiti. These fascinating markings give us an extraordinary insight into the lives, beliefs, and experiences of those who were once imprisoned within these walls. The letters VV, standing for Virgo Virginum, were often etched into the walls as a plea for the Virgin Mary's blessing and protection. Among the graffiti are numerous names and initials, including that of Thomas Abel, a chaplain to Queen Catherine of Aragon. He was imprisoned in the Beauchamp Tower after publishing a book opposing divorce. Henry VIII ordered the books to be burned, and Abel was temporarily released. However, he was arrested again in 1533 for continuing to support Catherine's claim as queen. After enduring 5.5 years in the Tower, Abel was hung, drawn and quartered at Smithfield in 1540. Many noble or knightly prisoners carved their family crests and coats of arms into the walls to show their identity and status. One example of this is the Dudley family, 4 brothers imprisoned within the Tower between 1553 and 1554 because their father John Dudley, the Duke of Northumberland, had gambled everything to place Lady Jane Grey on the throne. Lady Jane Grey was married to his son Guildford, and the risky move cost him his life as well as those of his son and daughter-in-law. His other 4 sons, John, Henry, Ambrose and Robert, were imprisoned for high treason. They were all later released, but the carving remains as a reminder of this turbulent time. The flowers on the carving represents each one of the imprisoned brothers: roses for Ambrose, carnations, known as gillyflowers, for Guildford, oak leaves for Robert and honeysuckle for Henry. It's thought that the carving was made by the 5th brother John, who put his name at the bottom. John Dudley died just 10 days after leaving the Tower, and Henry later died in battle at the siege of San Quentin in 1557. Ambrose was popular under Queen Elizabeth I, rising to the position of Master of the Ordnance, while Robert became the Queen's favourite, earning the title of Earl of Leicester. From condemned traitors to royal confidants, the Dudley brothers' graffiti is forever etched into the walls of the Tower. The Tower's walls also feature a heart with the letter E inside, which stands for Elizabeth. This carving, along with another, was made by Queen Elizabeth's Italian tutor Giovanni Battista Castiglione, who was imprisoned in 1556 in the Salt Tower by Elizabeth's sister, Queen Mary I, for plotting against her. He was severely tortured but was later released. Alongside the knights and noblemen are the ordinary people who carved their names in hope that they will also be remembered. Some of these inscriptions offer a haunting glimpse into their final thoughts and pleas for justice. Others never got to finish what they started, and some wrote their name twice just to make sure they weren't forgotten. Edward Smalley served as a servant to a Member of Parliament who had failed to pay a fine for assault. As a result, Smalley was imprisoned for a month in 1576 in the Beauchamp Tower, where you can find his name inscribed twice. Another inscription was carved by James Tipping, who was arrested in 1586 for his involvement in the Babington Conspiracy, a plot to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I and place the Catholic Mary Queen of Scots on the throne. His exact role in the scheme remains unclear, but his inscription suggests that at the time he was uncertain of his fate. As it turned out, he was released just over a year later. The stories behind these markings reveal the courage, faith, and resilience of those who faced unimaginable hardships. Most surviving records were written by the educated elite, but graffiti provides us with a rare, unfiltered connection to the past of ordinary people, even including children. Norwich Cathedral has a 9 men's Morris board carved into a stone bench, and there are other examples of alquerque, an early form of checkers. Modern surveys, such as the Norfolk Medieval Graffiti Survey, have played a critical role in recording and preserving these historical gems. Many medieval graffiti examples remained unnoticed until these surveys began. In the early 20th century, concerns arose over the deteriorating stonework of the Tower of London, which was affecting the historic graffiti etched into its walls. To preserve these inscriptions, the Royal Mint was enlisted to create wax moulds before further erosion could erase them forever. The Royal Mint had a long-standing connection to the Tower, having operated there for 500 years until its relocation in 1810. In 1914, a team returned to undertake this crucial preservation project, where each inscription was carefully replicated twice. By the time the project was completed later that year, a total of 458 moulds had been carefully created, ensuring that these historical artifacts will remain forever. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating history chronicles. Thank you for watching. See you next time.